started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago. He was, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's like, tolerate them. Now you do sound like Hitler.
That was...
And recently he talked about them holding unacceptable views.
Wow. I'm surprised to hear that Trudeau said those things.
You didn't see the blackface? I mean,
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Management of the Absurd Wednesday, April the 17th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and management of the absurd. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Thank you. And now, cars.
For the sake of story, we're going to call him Jim. What do you do for a living, Jim? He says, I'm a limo driver. One limo, you make pretty good money with it? He goes, yeah, but I don't use it like a regular limo. He said, I had a guy approach me. He was a private investigator. You ever thought about doing some work for me? I'll send you out. You pick a client up. You take them wherever they want to go. Do whatever they want to do. You drop them off. He said, whatever you got to tell them to get in that car, you tell them. Gets a phone call. Bring your limo by. He said, I'm going to give you $5,000 to go to this bar, pick this guy up. You get him in this car. He goes to this certain bar. After waiting about 2 hours, guy comes staggering out. Guess what, buddy? The 100th person to leave this bar tonight, and you get a free limo ride home anywhere you want to go. He hops in. Take me here. Well, next thing you know, he goes a little further down. Stop the car! A lady that hangs out on the bad side of town. Next thing you know, she gets in the limousine. And they finally drop him off. I was his private investigator buddy that hired him. Said, I'm done. I dropped him off here. He said, bring your car back and you'll get paid. 2 weeks later, he calls him back. Says, hey, I need you to run down to Atlanta. Pick a client up at the airport. Same story.
On Tuesday morning early, I got a text from Doug Tabbitt, and he said, message this guy, tell him you'll wire money immediately and buy this car. And it was a gorgeous 1995 Porsche 993. But the asking price on the car was $35,000. And that was way cheaper than something that looked that good normally should be. And the story on this car was that a few months after he had bought the car in 2009, he had taken it to a PCA track event. And unfortunately, he found himself sliding backwards into a tire wall. But a few years after that, after 2013, when he rechecked the Carfax, it now showed that the car was totaled. And in his head, he had blown that so far out of proportion that he undervalued the car. So I get up there and the car is immaculate. I mean, just beautiful, clearly worth 45 to 50 grand today, probably 55 to 60 if I can somehow get Carfax to change their tune about what the accident was. Passed emissions easily when I got it back to Georgia, and we had just a great drive home in the car.
Me and my first wife were riding down to see her folks for the holidays. And there's a good-looking black C4 Corvette parked behind the finance company. I called the following Monday, and sure enough, it was a repossession. She said, there's only one problem. It had a small fire. I bought this car for $2,500. I drove this thing with the smell of burnt plastic leather, got me a brand new seat for it. I sold it for $9,500 7 days later to a nice man in Houston, Texas. My ex-wife. She backs into it running about 20 miles an hour, just killed the front bumper cover on it. We're 14 hours from delivery. I go pick up a yellow bumper cover. We pulled the bumper cover off of it. We put the yellow bumper cover on to make sure it fits right. The rest of the car was bagged up. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the bumper was done painting. Well, it has to dry. So about an hour after that, about 3:30, I got back to my house with the car, made me a big cup of coffee and drove to the airport. And that man got in his Corvette that he absolutely loved and drove it back to Houston, Texas.
I ran Earl with this car, and I had a Can-Am motor, I bought from Meraki.
That's an all-aluminum 427. Basically a ZL1 motor, but they're slightly different.
Reynolds Aluminum made it back then. Rich says, I got this Can-Am motor, said, but it won't go out, it won't get out of the tins. He said, you want to take a shot with it? I said, yeah. So I went to Syracuse, picked the motor up. So I run this motor with 660s. I went to the speed shop, ordered me an Elderbrock Cross Ram, ordered me 2 box Dominators, rejetted the carburetors, Fall Nationals, English Town, Raceway Park. I get to the track. I haven't tested it. My boys we went to the line, staged her up, cleaned the tires, and I made a blast. When I dropped it in high gear, I knew I was going the fastest pass I ever made. 9:57. When I got to the trailer, every motherfucker at the track was there.
This Porsche was called the Widowmaker. Back in the 70s, Porsche needed to build a homologated model for the 935 race car to continue competing in the racing series. Since the 935 race car was turbocharged, Porsche decided to also turbocharge their regular 930 model. Therefore, the Porsche 930 Turbo was made. The regular 930 was already a handful to drive with the engine being in the rear, as well as the lack of driver assist. However, the 930 Turbo was even more insane with almost twice the horsepower. Porsche tried to add bigger rear tires and a massive spoiler, yet the 930 Turbo was still extremely untamable. But Porsche decided to sell the 930 Turbo anyway. When the Pocket Rocket was finally released, many people admired it, and everyone wanted one as a status symbol. However, the consequences slowly caught up as the people buying the 930 Turbo had more money than driving skills. The unexpected liftoff oversteer and the aggressive turbo lag from the 930 Turbo sent many inexperienced drivers to heaven. And that's why
I want a personalized plate. So I phoned a friend. I said, Travis, I need a cool personalized plate. He said, BND, the number 4, LFE, banned for life. He goes, the very first YouTube video you ever told was talking about how you were permanently banned for life from eBay. My mother checks my mail. She sent me a text, said, you got something from the local DMV. I needed to call in and explain why I wanted this on a license plate. Call the DMV, and lady picks up. She said, why do you want banned for life? What are you banned from? And I said, you've got it all wrong. She said, what do you mean? I said, I was in the marching band. She goes, oh, we thought it was for some kind of illegal activity or something like that. 2 weeks later, my tag was in the mail.
So he says, Ed, will y'all take a personal check for this thing? And I'm like, well, it's not my call, but I'll certainly go ask. And he said, sure. I mean, this guy's an NBA player, made a lot of money. He's bought a bunch of cars. I mean, I can't imagine anything will go wrong. And we deposit the check and, just assume that at some point he's going to bring this title. So a few days later, we get a call from our bank and they say that the check had bounced. Insufficient funds. Finally, I get in touch with him. He's like, oh man, I'm sorry. I deposited some money. I thought it would hit. I'm sorry that didn't clear. I'll send a wire or, bring you a check tomorrow. After about 35, 40 days, his temp tag's expired. He can't drive the car anymore. He's not responding to my GM, but occasionally I'll get get something back from him. And finally, I get him to say, hey, you can come meet me for dinner and we'll talk about this. He's like, I think I just want you to give me the money that you were going to give me on trade for the Gallardo, and then I'll just give you the Aston Martin back. Problem with that is an over-allowance. Finally, like, all right, just whatever. It's the only hope we have to get this car back amicably or reasonably amicably. Go get it. I take the car back, get it listed for sale again. And we never heard from this customer anymore, unfortunately.
We are planning on a group drive to a BMW show. We see the state police coming up behind us, and he now stops in front of us, and we're all pulled over in the breakdown lane. He has a conversation with whomever it was that was in front. Then he comes to my vehicle. We have the same conversation. I give him those documents. He says, you and your passenger, get out of the car, go stand on the grass. And then he proceeds to have the same conversation with about 37 other cars behind me. And the gentleman who was in the front says, you must have heard calls about another pack of speeding BMWs. And this officer says, you want me to believe that there's 2 packs of speeding BMWs? And at this very moment, the other pack of speeding BMWs proceeds to pass us at triple-digit speeds. So he proceeds to now get in the car and take off. 30 minutes later, we see him come back down the other side of the highway. You're going to go down the highway. You're going to see one of your friends. He's going to jail. Please make sure you honk and wave and smile and say thank you. He's the one that's keeping all of you out of jail today.
And I look up and he's wearing a hat that says 2000 GT. Is that a Toyota 2000 GT hat? And he goes, oh, you know the 2000 GT? And I go, I do know the car. My father had one. I grew up in one. Your dad had one. I have 9 of them. So we start talking. I go, yeah, I'll show you some photos. My earliest childhood memories were being in that car with my dad in Puerto Rico. As I say this, I see movement and I look up at him and he's turned to me and his eyes are as big as saucers. And he goes, I have your car. What do you mean you have my car? And he goes, I have your family's car. I bought it from your family. And I'm blown away. So I show him the photo of me in the little electric car. And he goes, do me a favor, zoom in on the plate. So I zoom in on the license plate. He goes, I still have the original plate. And the guy turns to me and goes, where do you live? And I go, Southern California. He goes, listen, I live in Florida. You have to promise me you will fly out to Florida. I will rent out Moroso, the Palm Beach International Raceway. And I want you to drive your dad's car. And I don't want you to drive it. I want you to drive it. And maybe we do a little coaching one-on-one. I'm thinking, what?
I got a job at a new Ford dealership, and I'm just kind of standing around twiddling my thumbs. First day at work, a gold F-150 pulls into the dealership. I got out and introduced myself to him. I said, you looking at an F-150? He said, yeah, I am. He said, I'm thinking about getting me a new one. He said, I love these King Ranch trucks. Well, we had a black one sit on the front line standing tall. He said, you know what? Let's see what we can do on this black truck. I'm like, all right. So I went to see my sales manager. We put a little deal together right quick. Gary's easy to deal with. He was happy with the number. He bought a black truck. And so his wife comes pulling up. She gets in. She jokes around. She said, you know, we always have matching cars, Gary. So I sold his wife a brand new black Eddie Bauer Explorer that day. He bought every XL F-150 we had. He bought all 5 of them that day. And then his son came in the next day and actually bought him a brand new truck also. And that was the best first day ever selling cars.
And that was Cars. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the patriotic shorts.
The only anti-war experience that I really had was, and a rumor came up, students are going to take over the ROTC building. The detachment commander, full colonel, said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And he had a stack of baseball bats. He said, we're going to guard the building from the inside. You are not to strike at anybody outside the building. But if they reach their hand through a window or a door, you are authorized to hit that hand with these bats. They never came near the building.
In the early hours of a September morning, 1940, this plane was making its way towards London, carrying 2 tons of bombs to the densely populated city. It may well have reached its destination, if not for the early warning systems the British military home defense had created. A network of radar stations all feeding into a central operations room where incoming raid information was ratified and mapped on a gigantic chart of Britain. It was from this room in Bentley Priory that all RAF commands during the Battle of Britain were made. This was a frantic but precise procedure. This groundbreaking air defense network allowed Britain's defenders to be in the air at interception altitude within 10 minutes of the first signs of invasion on the radar screens.
Every day you're either advancing or retreating and digging a foxhole every night. You sleep 2 hours, your buddy is on guard looking out of the foxhole, and you teach these new people to start over on one side with a view and come all the way across. If something moves in here, you do not stop and look at it. You come back again this way, and if it moves, you still don't stop. When you come back that third time and it's still moving, you better raise up your rifle and take a shot at it, because anybody can look at anything, and after a while, it's going to move on you. So we train them to do this in order to distinguish between shooting at nothing and firing at actual target.
Why does NASA need fighter jets? This is the F/A-18D used by NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center, and this is the F-15D. Even though NASA doesn't need to take down enemy aircraft or carry out airstrikes, these fighter jets are still an important part of NASA's inventory. But the reason for this isn't what most people think. These jets are known as chase planes, and they aren't just for combat. They're crucial in training pilots into astronauts and keeping NASA's spacecraft safe. But why does NASA actually need these chase planes? NASA isn't just about space. They research and design advanced fighter jets and interceptors. The F-15D keeps constant radio contact with research pilots and gives an additional layer of safety during specific tests and maneuvers. However, the F/A-18s specialize in photo or video chase missions, transmitting live video feeds back to the Armstrong Flight Research Center. This allows engineers to visually monitor missions as they unfold.
Good morning, Steve.
He pointed Tank Frank Tukowski, who's my friend. I talk to him a couple of times a week. He's dying. He's 94. He lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And he was the lieutenant. Well, he come to my tent and he said, I'm with the leader of the new Scout Sniper Platoon. You're my platoon sergeant. I said, Frank, I'm only a buck sergeant. He said, you're going to be my platoon sergeant. So I was. And we went around and he said, now we're going to get 30, I believe it was 32 men. And so he put the word out to all the battalions. He'd be coming around on such a date, and he didn't want to see the men. He just wanted to look at their record books. And I went with him. And he'd go in the field officer and say, well, I want to get the names of the guys that volunteer for the Scout and Snipers. And he didn't want to talk. He just looked at the record book. Brig time. He's my man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really. He took the guys that had bad records, that they had spirit, you know?
Spirit.
Yeah.
The founders recognized that Americans were not exceptional at all, and that's exceptional. When the Constitution was adopted, they weren't worried about the British coming over again. They all these checks and balances, the separation of powers, the two-layer federalism, the central government, and then all the state governments. And then at the national government, you had the legislative and the executive and the judicial. And then the legislative is broken up into two houses. It's a bicameral system. They're spreading the power as thinly as they can. And they're doing it not because the British might come over and become tyrannical again. They did all this because they knew that the Americans could become tyrannical again. And this is why this is one of my favorite pet peeve arguments. And some conservatives in last decade or so have wanted to emphasize American exceptionalism. And then they talk about American exceptionalism.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little motivation.
You don't feel like it today. I know you had a long night. You're a little tired. You don't feel like it. I get it. But if you don't feel like getting after it, I hope you feel like being weak. I hope you feel like not accomplishing anything, because that's what's going to happen. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And yet somehow we expect things to change. You think you're going to get in better shape. You think you're going to get more money. You think your relationship is going to improve. You think you're going to get promoted. You think you're going to get a raise. You think the world is going to get better without you doing anything, but it isn't. Nothing is going to change unless you change what you're doing. Change the junk food that you're eating. Change the time that you wake up. Change what you do when you get out of bed. Change what you do with your time. That's what you need to do. You have to change some things or nothing will change. So make changes and start little. Get up a little bit earlier. Get a workout done. Doesn't have to be epic. You don't have to do a 3-hour leg day, but get up and get something done. And how about you plan what you're going to do in the day? How about you change what time you get to work by showing up 10 minutes earlier? And you square your gear away, or you dial in your tools, or your desk, or your workspace. That's what you need to do.
You want to know how to get better? You want to know how to take back control of your life? Stop looking for a sweatless solution. Stop looking for the easy path. Stop looking for someone or something to turn it all around for you. And start looking for your will. Start looking for your discipline.
When you start hearing that weakness creep into your brain, telling you to back down, in that very moment, you've got to decide that you're going to be the commander of your brain. You've got to shut that weak voice down. It does not get a vote in what you're doing today. Your laziness, your sore legs, your sleepiness, your feelings, none of those get a vote. You're asserting dominance over your mind. You are getting done, whether you feel like it or not. If you tell yourself the truth, and the truth is, I'm not happy with where I'm at. That's the truth. The truth is, I can do more. The truth is, I can be in better shape. The truth is, I can work harder than I'm working right now. The truth is, I can do more for my family. The truth is, I can do much better than I'm doing right now. If that's the real truth, if that's what you believe, if you believe that to be the truth, you won't have to find more discipline. Discipline will find you.
I don't hang with people who can only get up when they got something to motivate them. That's not somebody I want to hang out with. I want to hang with somebody, I don't care what the circumstances. I don't care what the situation. You can put it on your back and you like, let's go. Are you hearing me? Not at it, dog. You got to be intentional and deliberate. And everybody that's running with you got to be intentional and deliberate. Discipline is doing what you said you were going to do when you don't feel like doing it, when you felt like doing it in the first place. That's all it is. But most people will not be successful because when there's not anything emotionally attached to it, they're going to quit and give up. Most people were closer than they ever thought they were to finishing that big thing, but they never finished it because they didn't feel like finishing it. Or they were doing it and it was pain. And most people quit in the pain because the pain hurts so bad that they don't know if they want to keep going to get to go. Like you're going to wake up most days and not be pumped up. You're going to wake up most days and not feel like doing it. But when you can get to a point that you do it anyway, then there's no way you won't reach any of your goals.
And you will have to fight and fight and fight and fight. And most of you won't be successful not because you can't do it, but you can't outlast your old you long enough to get to your new you.
There's no one said, I want to procrastinate. I don't want to get it done. I don't want to get to the next level. No, every person wants to make their dreams become a reality.
But the reason why most people will never get it, never achieve it, and never succeed is because you got to give up stuff in order to go up. You got to make sacrifices. You got to discipline yourself consistently. You got to program yourself to suffer on a daily basis in order to reform those lazy habits into ones that build success.
I need you to do that sucks every day of your life. That's how you get better. That's how you get stronger. You embrace the resistance you feel when you're stretching yourself to go beyond what's comfortable. And if you're not pushing yourself, you're shrinking. You are fading away. And the reason why we fast from time to time is not that we have to fast, but at some point you gotta fast because you gotta tell the flesh who's in control. I'm in control. You're not in control. I know you don't want to wake up. You don't have an option. Get up. We trying to eat. There's a certain lifestyle we want.
Everybody wants it. Everybody dreams of it, but very few are willing to work for it. So you got to make a declaration that you are going to be one of those few people who will make it happen. Talk is cheap, so you shut your mouth and grind. Your actions will speak for themselves. You make those those little changes, those little habits that you have to change them, those bad habits. And you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. The little things, the little changes, they add up and they become big things. Change the little things, and over time, you can change your life. But if you don't change what you're doing and how you do it, nothing else will change. Reset your brain, reset your habits, reset your life.
And that was a little motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Law for April 17th.
April 17th. Stay above the fray. Regard it as more courageous not to become involved in an engagement than to win in battle. And where there is already one interfering fool, take care that there shall not be two. Baltasar Gracian. Do not let people drag you into their petty fights and squabbles. At the same time, you cannot completely stand aside, or that would cause needless offense. To play the game properly, you must seem interested in other people's problems, even sometimes appear to take their side. But while you make outward gestures of support, you must maintain your inner energy and sanity by keeping your emotions disengaged. No matter how hard people try to pull you in, never let your interest in their affairs and petty squabbles go beyond the surface. Give them gifts, listen with a sympathetic look, even occasionally play the charmer. But inwardly, keep both the friendly kings and the perfidious tyrants at arm's length. By refusing to commit, and thus maintaining your autonomy, you retain the initiative. Your moves stay matters of your own choosing, not defensive reactions to the push and pull of those around you. Daily Law. Always try to inwardly maintain your independence and avoid entanglements not of your choosing. The 48 Laws of Power, Law 20. Do not commit to anyone.
And that was the Daily Law for April the 17th from the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
If we're just talking to God in an undifferentiated way, then we're not praying in a manner different than the way a Jew or a Muslim or a general monotheist would pray. What's the Christian difference? The Christian difference is that the one God who's displayed himself now as Father, Son, and Spirit, we pray to the Father as though the Son has his arm around our shoulder, because the Father sent the Son into our own humanity, into our sin and death. So the Son's gone all the way out. So the Son now helps us to pray to the Father. Now, where's the Holy Spirit come in? The Holy Spirit is the love that connects the Father and the Son. In fact, now in this prayer, the Son's arm around my shoulder, directed to the Father, is a prayer in the Holy Spirit. I've been drawn into the dynamics of the love between the Father and the Son. God has opened up the Trinitarian life and now includes us in it.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, all public interest legislation and any distribution of money taken by force from some men for the unearned benefit of others comes down ultimately to the grant of an undefined, non-objective, arbitrary power to some government officials, unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we'll pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
Reversal. To be caught in a deception is dangerous. If you don't know that your cover is blown, now suddenly your enemies have more information than you do, and you become their tool. If the discovery of your deceit is public, on the other hand, your reputation takes a blow, or worse. The punishments for spying are severe. You must use deception with utmost caution then, employing the least amount of people as possible to avoid the inevitable leaks. You should always leave yourself an escape route, a cover story to protect you should you be exposed. Be careful not to fall in love with the power that deception brings. The use of it must always be subordinate to your overall strategy and kept under control. If you become known as a deceiver, try being straightforward and honest for a change. That will confuse people, because they won't know how to read you. Your honesty will become a higher form of deception. Here are further reflections on misperception strategies by Winston Churchill. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. From Masters of Deception by David Muir. Dudley Clark was always clear, and a little later it will be shown to have been a pity that others were not equally so, that you can never by deception persuade an enemy of anything not according with his own expectations, which usually are not far removed from his hopes. It is only by using your knowledge of them that you are able to hypnotize him, not just into thinking, but doing what you want. From The Greco-Persian Wars by Peter Green. Themistocles therefore had two urgent and simultaneous problems to solve. He must take effective action, not only to block any projected withdrawal by the Peloponnesian contingents, but also to ensure that they fought where and when he planned that they should. And he must somehow tempt Xerxes into making the one move which might lead to a Greek victory, that is, ordering his fleet to attack in the Salamis Channel. The device Themistocles finally adopted, what Plutarch calls his celebrated trick with Sisinus, is one of the most enigmatic episodes in all Greek history. Evidence for it goes back as far as Aeschylus's Persians, performed only 8 years after Salamis. What seems to have happened was this. At some point during the long argument over final strategy, Themistocles, anticipating defeat, slipped away from the conference and sent for his children's tutor, the most faithful of his slaves, an Asiatic Greek named Sisinus. This man was given a carefully prepared message or letter to deliver to Xerxes and sent off across the straits in a small boat, probably just before dawn on the 19th of September. The substance of the message was as follows. Themistocles sent it under his own name as commander of the Athenian contingent. He had, he told Xerxes, changed sides and was now ardently desirous of a Persian victory. No real reason is given for this volte-face, though disgust at the attitude of the Peloponnesian contingents would provide a strong enough motive to carry conviction. The Greek allies were at each other's throats and would offer no serious opposition. On the contrary, you will see the pro-Persians amongst them fighting the rest. Furthermore, they were planning a general withdrawal from Salamis under cover of darkness, to be carried out the following night. If Xerxes struck at once, on the divide and rule principle, he could forestall such a move, attack them and destroy their naval power, while they are still disorganized and before they have joined forces with their land army. The conquests of the Peloponnese would then become a comparatively simple matter. On the other hand, if Xerxes allowed the various Greek contingents to slip through his fingers and disperse homewards, the war might drag on indefinitely, since he would have to deal with each separate city-state in turn. Sisinus's arguments impressed the Persian admirals, and they duly passed them on to the great king himself. Xerxes, we are told, believed the report because it was in itself plausible, and also because it was just what he wanted to hear. There was trouble brewing in Ionia and the empire, and the sooner this Greek expedition was wound up, the better. Themistocles, always a shrewd judge of human nature, knew very well that after so many days of delay and frustration, the great king would grasp at anything which seemed to offer a quick solution to his problem. From The Secrets of D-Day by Gilles Perrault. At the end of the war, Allied intelligence officers discovered in captured files of the German Secret Service the text of 250 messages received from agents and other sources before D-Day. Nearly all mentioned July and the Calais sector. One message alone gave the exact date and place of the invasion. It had come from a French colonel in Algiers. The Allies had discovered this officer was working for the Abwehr, and he was arrested and subsequently turned round. He too was used to mislead Berlin. Used and abused. The Germans were so often deceived by him that they ended by treating all his information as valueless. But they kept in contact, for it is always useful to know what the enemy wants you to believe. Allied intelligence, with great boldness and truly remarkable perversity, had the colonel announce that the invasion would take place on the coast of Normandy on the 5th, 6th, or 7th of June. For the Germans, his message was absolute proof that the invasion was to be on any day except the 5th, 6th, or 7th of June, and on any part of the coast except Normandy. From the Ramayana by Valmiki. Now Ravana said to himself, "These are all petty weapons. I should really get down to proper business." And he invoked the one called Maya, a weapon which created illusions and confused the enemy. With proper incantations and worship, he sent off this weapon, and it created an illusion of reviving all the armies and its leaders, Kumbhakarna and Indrajit and the others, and bringing them back to the battlefield. Presently, Rama found all those who he thought were no more coming on with battle cries and surrounding him. Every man in the enemy's army was again up in arms. They seemed to fall on Rama with victorious cries. This was very confusing, and Rama asked Matali, whom he had by now revived, "What is happening now? How are all these coming back? They were dead." Matali explained, "In your original identity, you are the creator of illusions in this universe. Please know that Ravana has created phantoms to confuse you. If you make up your mind, you can dispel them immediately." Matali's explanation was a great help. Rama at once invoked a weapon called Jnana, which means wisdom or perception. This was a very rare weapon, and he sent it forth. And all the terrifying armies who seemed to have come on in such a great mass suddenly evaporated into thin air. From The Mind of War by Grant T. Hammond. The real impact of such a strategy is the dissipation of resources, the creation of both self-fulfilling and suicidal prophecies, and the destruction of truth and trust. It maximizes confusion and disorder and destroys the organization's resilience, adaptability, core values, and ability to respond. The key to such a strategy, says Colonel John Boyd, is less deception, the creation of a false order, and more ambiguity, confusion about reality itself. You want to combine fact and fiction to create ambiguity for an adversary, for the combination creates more problems, requires longer to sort out, and calls more into question than merely inserting false information. As an example, he recalled the story of a group of Germans after the Normandy invasion who had stolen some American uniforms and jeeps. They went around the French countryside changing all the road signs to confuse the Allies as they advanced through the area. Soon the Americans figured out that the directions had been reversed and simply did the opposite of whatever the signs indicated. How much more effective it would have been if the Germans had changed only a portion of the signs, a third to a half, and created even more problems for the Americans. Creating ambiguity about the signs' accuracy and prolonging the time it would take to discover the problem would have been far more effective than changing all the signs in a consistent fashion.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
On this Wednesday morning. Now this. You need copper for the green revolution. It's used to make EV batteries, wind turbines, and power lines. No surprise, the price has skyrocketed recently. So, why can't we go get our own? There's a huge copper deposit in Alaska, but Biden says no, it cannot be touched. You can't even build a road to get to it. Now, this story was leaked to the New York Times. That's the Democrats' mouthpiece. The administration wanted to get the word out to the environmentalists. We'll protect the caribou and the fragile ecosystem, as the Times calls it. Alaska is bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined, but there's no room for a 200-mile road. This is purely political. Biden wants to polish his green credentials in an election year. He doesn't care about Alaska and the jobs and revenue a copper mine would bring. Alaska has hardly any electoral college votes. There's the story. No, he's appealing to suburban greenies who wouldn't be caught dead in Alaska. The cancellation of the Ambler Road project, that's what it's called, is another landmark in the annals of no-can-do America. If you're in the natural resource business, mining, logging, quarrying, even farming, you are constantly told what you cannot do. Now it's a 200-mile road in Alaska, no can do. Even though the copper at the end of the trail would help America go green. That's politics in the Biden era. Do nothing and blame the Republicans for trying to kill the planet. By the way, Donald Trump okayed the Ambler Road project back in 2020. But when Biden was elected, the new Interior Secretary said the road's environmental impact had not been studied properly. So it was restudied, and the proper conclusion was reached. Kill it. And Biden did. Second hour, Varney, just getting started.
So, two things. First of all, nonprofit news now. Secondly, is that government has no rights. The government has no right to deny the people, access to nature's abundant resources. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, management of the absurd.
Praise can have a positive effect. For example, praise helps to keep relatively stable the patterns of relationships between people in organizations, allowing hierarchies or structures to be maintained. How does praise work toward this end? Let's use as an example a problem-solving committee meeting that includes the executive vice president at one end of the hierarchy and a new junior assistant at the other. If the assistant comes up with the brightest and most useful idea, some way must be found to accept it without lowering the status of the vice president in the eyes of the group, thereby threatening the group's stability. Intuitively, the vice president may say to the young assistant, "That's a very good idea. We can use that." This not-so-simple act of praise has resolved the situation nicely. Status has been maintained because, as we remember, praise is a way of claiming status. The young assistant has been reminded of his place in the hierarchy, and the group is restored to comfortable equilibrium. In this situation, and others like it, praise is a lubricant that helps keep our human relations in good working order. The fundamental issue with praise has to do with its credibility, which is eroded because it's used for so many purposes other than simply expressing appreciation. But on those all too infrequent occasions when it's believable, for example, when we read a letter written to a third party in which the writer speaks highly of us, not knowing that we will ever see the letter, praise is welcome indeed. Here's an idea that surprises people. The best resource for the solution of any problem is the person or group that presents the problem. For example, ex-convicts are better able to rehabilitate prison inmates than is the prison staff. Ex-drug addicts are more successful in getting other addicts off drugs than are psychiatrists. Students learn more from each other than they do from their professors. People tend to be much smarter about their own situations than we give them credit for. After all, a full grasp of any problem is only in the hands of the people who have experienced it. In the early 1940s, when Carl Rogers claimed that people with problems might be in the best position to know what to do about them, the professional world responded with disbelief and ridicule. How could the very people who were suffering from a problem know how to solve it? This idea was heresy to professionals trained to think that problems could be solved only by bringing to bear their own analytic ability and therapeutic skills. But this idea has since gained acceptance in practically every professional area, including management. It's not practiced uniformly, of course, because sometimes experts can help, and people are not always the best judges of their own situations. Nevertheless, Roger's belief, which at one time seemed absurd, now has wide currency. Community planners, for example, recognize the efficacy of involving the people for whom the plans are being made in each stage of the process. It leads not only to wider acceptance of a plan, but improves it, because these people often have a keen awareness of issues that professionals have not fully assessed. We can rely on people in this way because within all of us lies a mastery of roles that we rarely, if ever, play, each requiring complex skills we have somehow learned through the natural course of our lives. That's the basic reason why managers can become effective even though they may never have had a day of formal training. They already know how. Participative management, involving the people who have to do the work in the decisions that will affect them, is based upon the idea that people are better than we think they are and can be counted on to make wise choices. A considerable amount of research shows that people learn faster, produce more, and are more highly motivated when participative methods are employed. The challenge for management is how to tap this powerful resource. No one knows the ceiling of performance when the proper expectations are introduced and the appropriate social architecture is in place. But here's another paradox. While the participative approach is widely agreed to be effective, it is seldom put into practice. Companies experiment with it, but few, if any, employ participative management in a continuing, organization-wide manner. Why is that so? One answer, of course, is that managers don't like to demean their own expertise by assuming that the group can do it better. But there are other reasons, too. Participative management depends on trusting the group. Most managers simply don't have that confidence and can't take the time to develop that trust. Even when groups are consulted, they don't always believe in themselves, and they may resist the idea of involvement. Let's face it can take an inordinate amount of time and patience to develop a group that can practice participative management. One must have the patience of a saint to sit through the meetings where the group may spend 30 minutes talking about the coffee machine. Companies also stumble by pursuing participative management ideas that are overly simplistic and do not acknowledge the complexities of organizational behavior. Many companies fail to recognize that the participative approach requires a somewhat different leader who's tuned into the undercurrents and the hidden agendas that accompany any meeting. Finally, managers who experiment with participative methods open themselves up to abuse. Groups that are testing their leaders' ability to hear what they're saying or to accept their ideas can humiliate the leaders by resisting attempts to evoke participation. In such situations, managers who try to elicit ideas often become the focus of the group's complaints. Sometimes there's even open hostility. Mary Douglas, the noted British anthropologist, once explained to me that participative systems are importantly different from hierarchical systems, not just in the way that risks are assessed and decisions made, but also in the ways people are treated. The introduction of highly participative systems tends to bring attacks on the stronger members, often the leaders, while more hierarchical systems bring attacks on the weaker members. I remember consulting at a university in which the provost of one of the colleges was committed to a participative approach. All matters that needed deciding were brought before the students and faculty. The entering freshmen were impressed that they could express themselves so freely, that they could challenge the provost, even use obscenities with him and get away with it. It was so exhilarating to the young people that they neglected to appreciate the debilitating effect on the provost. Each incoming class would go through somewhat the same ritual, testing and abusing the leader. Over a period of a couple of years, I witnessed the gradual wearing down of the provost who had undertaken the experiment with unbridled energy and enthusiasm. He resigned his post in the third year, and the program reverted to a traditional form. That experience was one of many that led me to take what I would call a conservation of resources approach to consulting with groups. I now tend to begin my consultation by asking the group to identify its most valuable resources. Typically, human resources, usually the group leader and the most creative individuals in the group. Then I explore with the group the way these resources could be protected, enhanced, and conserved. More often than not, the group will realize on its own that these individuals require expressions of appreciation, recognition, even some deference. The group itself will often come up with ways to respect the special needs of these individuals. For example, understanding that at times they need to be able to close their doors or to work unusual hours. Instead of complaining about the leadership styles, work habits, or idiosyncrasies of its colleagues, the group designs ways to accommodate them.
And that was the next part of Management of the Absurd by Richard Farson. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.